Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where each week we give you another episode of what's happening here on our Northeast Iowa 21-acre homestead. My husband Alvin and I have been married for 25 years and we have 7 children. 5 of those children still live at home. Our oldest 2 are married and no longer live at home, so this means we also have 2 son-in-laws and 1 grandson so far. So on our 21-acre homestead, we seek to preserve the self-sufficient lifestyle of our Old Order Mennonite heritage for the next generation. We involve the children in every aspect of the homestead, from raising and harvesting our own meat, gardening and preserving to fill the family's larder, or preserving the dairy from the family milk cows, plus all the many other skills that develop the character and integrity and relationships of a family that seeks to bring glory and honor to their Heavenly Father. Good morning, friends. In today's video, I am going to be making some Gouda cheese. So excuse the sleepy face. It is 6 a.m. We have to do early chores because there's school now. So the boys are getting the cows ready, and I am going to sanitize my milk buckets. This is 3% peroxide in here, and if I know I'm going to be making cheese, I usually sanitize everything. But if I decide to make cheese and I didn't sanitize my buckets, it's usually not a big deal. I just go ahead and make cheese anyway. So this is also one of the main reasons that we use stainless steel for handling all of our milk, is because stainless steel is not porous, so it doesn't harbor bacteria, and it's very easily to keep it sanitized with just something simple like soap and water. If we store milk for drinking, we always put it in glass.
Monday to Tuesday, remember that?
Yeah.
Time?
Okay, get your buckets.
When we were milking Lizzie, actually no, it was after. She was done eating her Wayne process. She just like flopped down, and she was laying on her side with the halter still on.
Did you have the kick bar on?
No. What do you do up to that?
Are you done, Matt Kendrick?
So this milk is straight from the cow. We strained it and brought it to the house, and it's still like at 91, 92 degrees. So making cheese from fresh milk is always my goal. So next I'm going to add some mesophyllic cheese culture. Mesophyllic is the culture that you need for low temperature cheeses. So this milk for Gouda is not going to be heated any higher than 100 degrees. So I can use a mesophyllic culture. And what the culture does, it acidifies the milk just a little bit. And this will help the rennet to coagulate the milk, and it'll also give my cheese a little bit of a flavor. So I just sprinkled the freeze-dried culture over top of the milk, and then I let it set to rehydrate for about 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, I stir it in very well. And then I'm ready to add the rennet. Next, I'm dissolving 3/4 teaspoon of calf rennet into about half a cup of room temperature water. And after I dissolve the rennet in the water, I'm going to add it to the milk and stir that very well. So now we've added our culture and our rennet, and we're just going to cover this big pot of milk and let the culture and the rennet get to work. All right, friends, it has been an hour, and I can tell that my cheese has set. It's congoed. It's coagulated. That's the word. So we're just going to check for a clean break. And what we're going to do to check for a clean break, I'm going to bring you closer, is we're going to put a knife in and lift it. And if we get a real sharp, clean edge like that, we know they're ready to cut. If you get a real jagged and jelly-like edge, let it set for another 15 minutes and then come check again. And here again, I am sanitizing all of my equipment before I use it. So now we're just going to cut our 1-inch grid. And you can see that grid there. And now we're going to let those heal for 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and cut them this way. So after 5 minutes, your curds are going to have healed a little bit, and they're going to start sinking just below the surface. You can see how they're sinking just below the surface of the whey. That means they're already starting to release some of their whey. So now to cut my curds horizontally, I'm just going to use my skimmer here, and I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm going to start cutting through them and working my way up. And I don't know that this is the best way to do this, but this is my favorite way. So now these should all be in approximately 1-inch squares, but we're not going to get too picky about that right now. And we're just going to set the timer for another 5 minutes and let them rest and heal for another 5 minutes. So it has been 5 minutes, and so we rested the curds for 5 minutes. And now we're just going to gently stir them. So the more vigorously you stir your curds, the harder your cheese is going to be. So if you want a softer cheese, you're going to be real gentle. So the stirring of the curds helps them to release their whey, and the resting of the curds lets the curds heal. And when the curds heal, they are stronger, so they break apart less. And then that also means that they release their whey better, so they're more uniform in size, which gives you a better end product, because larger curds release their whey slowly, and smaller curds release their whey fast. So if you stir too vigorously and don't rest enough, then your curds will be all different sizes. And so then you'll have some that are ready to press long before others are ready to press. And it's all a learning process. You'll learn as you go. But the stirring is to help the curds release their way, and then the resting is for the curds to strengthen. So we're going to stir for 5 minutes and then rest for 5 minutes. And we're going to do that twice each, so for 20 minutes. Stir and rest, stir and rest. And when I'm gently stirring, I'm going to the bottom and I'm finding these bigger curds and just gently pressing them apart until they become smaller curds, because I want most of my curds to be the same size. And this process, this stirring process, is part of what makes your cheeses unique. Because if you've studied cheese making at all, you know that the ingredients you use for cheese making are all alike. So how are cheeses different? What's the difference between Gouda and cheddar and Asiago? The process is what makes it different. How you stir, how long you stir, how high you heat your temperature, and that is the only difference in cheeses. It all starts with the same thing: cheese, milk, and a culture, and rennet. So if you're more comfortable stirring with a spoon, that's fine. In the summertime, if I'm making cheese, I often use a spoon because I've been in the garden and my hands aren't real clean. But I haven't been in the dirt. I've been in the garden, but not in the dirt for a couple days. So I am using my hands. And I personally feel like I can be more gentle with my hands than I can be with a spoon, because when I get all the way down under there, I can feel the curds and I don't smush them. I just kind of go around them and bring them to the top. All right, so there was my timer. I'm going to set it for another 5 minutes, and we're going to let those curds rest for 5 minutes. All right, that was another rest. And now we're going to start stirring again, and your curds should feel a lot less fragile this time. This was one of my goals for this fall, is to make cheese over and over and over again so that I understand more about it and that it feels more like second nature. Because if I was making only one wheel of cheese or a couple wheels of cheese each month, then every time I came to make cheese, I felt like I had to go back to the drawing board and I lost my momentum. So this is my third wheel of Gouda this week. And so once I feel like I've mastered Gouda, like I understand, okay, this feels right, things like that, then I'll move on to master of another recipe. But the learning curve is long because this is an aged cheese, right? So we won't really even eat this until after Christmas. So the connection between this tastes like this because I did this, it's really hard to make that. So I plan to follow Venison for Dinner, who is a master cheesemaker. I plan to follow her advice and write on the outside of my vacuum seal bag what I did, because I know the first one I made, I rushed that one and my curds were really soft. But I've also been struggling with my cheeses are very hard. My aged cheeses are very hard when we eat them. And so I'm trying to experiment a little bit with putting it into the press while the curds are softer than I think they should be. But also I've learned that how vigorously you stir them can also make a difference on how firm your cheeses are. So I'm trying to perfect my stirring as well and be real gentle with my stirring. So one of the differences, what makes Gouda different than, let's say, cheddar? because the ingredients are the same. All the ingredients are the same. But with Gouda, and you'll see me do this in the next step, Gouda is considered a washed curd cheese. So what happens is I'm going to take out some of the whey and add warm water. And I do that twice, which means there's less whey in this cheese, and therefore it has a very mild and more of a nutty, buttery flavor, because whey left in curds or in cheese gives it kind of a sharp flavor. So Gouda is one of our favorites, and obviously my children don't like a real sharp cheese. I like a real sharp cheese. So that Gouda is a wash curd cheese, which means you add water and take out whey, so therefore you have less of a whey flavor in your milk, in your cheese, and it's more of a buttery, nutty flavor. And then with cheddar, you do something called a cheddaring process, where you allow your curds to rest in their own way, in their own warm way, and you turn them, and that makes more of a real firm and tangy cheese. So that's the difference, is your process. But we like the buttery and nutty flavor of Gouda. So I'm just still finding some of those bigger curds and breaking them. I have to be very disciplined with myself that I don't make them too small, because having my hands in a warm cheese pot and stirring these curds is like therapy for me. I call it my cheese pot therapy, because oftentimes when I'm not filming, I'm just stirring and thinking. You can see how much more firm the curds are. They're getting stronger, and that's the resting that makes them stronger. But you know, there's a balance. You don't want them so strong that they can't release their whey. All right, there was my timer again, Ruth Ann. It's time to let these curds rest. So that was the second stir. Now we're going to give it its second rest. We are going to prepare to wash our cheese. So we're going to start removing whey. So we're going to remove whey until we can see all the curds at the top, and now we're going to add our water. So the water that you're going to add has to be non-chlorinated. We have well water, and I just add well water, and you want to add it so you want the temperature of your water that you're adding to be 120 degrees. So you're just going to add that to your curds, and then I normally just add enough water to bring it back to about the same level it was with whey. And now we're going to stir for 10 minutes, and the temperature of our curds and whey after we added that 120 degree water should be about 95 degrees. So now we're just going to gently stir these curds for 10 minutes, and I'm just going to keep finding the bigger ones and breaking them, and I'm just going to gently stir them like this. And my curds are getting a lot more firm, you can tell. Isn't that cool? This milk was liquid and in the cow's udder less than 3 hours ago. Now we've stirred for 10 minutes, and we're going to rest for 5 minutes. And you can tell how the curds are sinking to the bottom a whole lot faster. And that's because they have less whey in, they're heavier, they're just going to disappear to the bottom a whole lot faster now. Okay, now we're going to remove some more whey, and this time you're going to be able to remove a lot more because your curds have shrank and they're going to settle to the bottom harder. So we're just going to remove all the whey that we can. So I removed all the whey that I could, and now I'm going to add some water back into it. This time, I only want the water to be 110 degrees, and I'm gonna fill it back up to where it was with 110 degree non-chlorinated water. If your water doesn't get that hot out of the tap, you can just heat it on the stovetop. So this is going to bring your curds and whey up to right around 100 degrees. And this time, you are going to stir for 20 minutes. Whichever happens first, 20 minutes or your curds start hanging together. So I'll show you when we get to that point. But first, we're going to have a good long thinking session while we stir these curds for 20 minutes. And you're just going to continue to be gentle, and you're kind of going to keep them from matting together on the bottom. And your curds are starting to feel very firm. Your smaller ones anyway. When you're learning to make cheese, I really encourage you to get real intimate with your curds. Like, find a small curd and feel it, see what it feels like, and then find a big curd and see what that one feels like, because that'll help you learn what curds feel like when they have released some of their whey, and it'll help you understand when your curds are ready to go into the press. At this point, it's not too late to still break apart some of your larger curds, but there shouldn't be too many extra large curds anymore. About 15 minutes, and I wanted to show you what the curds look like. So as you can tell, they're a lot smaller now. And so what we're looking for is for them to knit together like this, kind of where you can squeeze them together on a pile. And see, they're not quite ready yet because you can still easily crumble them apart. So I'm going to keep stirring them gently just to keep them from settling on the bottom and keep them moving. And here I've got a handful with a couple larger curds in, and you can see how those aren't knitting together at all. The smaller curds are now knitting together, but the larger curds aren't because they still contain too much whey. So we're going to keep stirring until they're all ready to knit together, even if it takes longer than 20 minutes. Okay, I think my curds are ready, and I'm going to show you why I think that way, why I think they're ready. Okay, so I'm going to get, or I should say, I think most of my curds are ready to go into the press. So I'm going to get a small handful. I'm just going to squeeze them gently and see how they hold their shape. When I squeeze them together, they hold their shape, and they don't, when I try to wiggle them apart, they don't wiggle apart. So I'm going to let them all settle to the bottom, and I'm going to get my press ready. So it takes me about 5 minutes to get my press ready, and as you can tell, the water from our tap gets very, very hot for a reason, so I can sanitize with my hot water. That's how I make sure my cheesecloth is sanitized, is I let real hot water, you can boil yours. You can boil your cheesecloth in hot water between uses. And I don't use an actual cheesecloth, I just use 100% cotton dishcloths that I get at Walmart. So I'm gonna put my cheesecloth into my press. And then we're ready to put the curds in there. So to make it easier for me to get the curds out, I'm just going to pour some more of this whey out from the top of my curds. And now I'm just gonna take chunks of these curds, and I'm going to press them all down firmly. I'm just gonna press them firmly into this cheese press, into this mold. So what causes the curds to knit together is how warm they stay. So for that reason, I'll take the remainder of this whey, this warm whey that's in here with these curds, and pour it all in there. And that'll keep all of these curds nice and warm. And we're just gonna let them set here just like this for about 10 minutes. So when you press your curds too early, too hard, the curds knit together and trap whey between themselves. And then as that whey dissipates, it leaves a little air pocket. And so that's one of the reasons. The more whey that stays in the cheese, the more tangy or sour it's going to taste. So it's important to not press too hard too early, because what's happening right now is these curds are just resting and gently knitting together in a natural way that allows the whey to escape from in between them. So we want to give it a good 10 minutes to allow the whey to naturally just run out from between all the curds before we start pressing. So after the curds have rested here in the mold for 10 minutes, we are going to cover them up with the one corner of our cheesecloth and put in the mold's follower. And then we're going to press them with light pressure, which is like 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. And we're going to let it at that weight for about 30 minutes. So for my cheese press, I just need to lay this heavy piece of metal on, and that's about 10 pounds. So I just let that rest on top. For your cheese press, it might look a little different because mine is homemade. So after 30 minutes of light pressure, we're going to take our wheel of cheese out of the mold and the press, and we're going to turn it around. We're going to flip it from bottom to top, and then we're going to put it all back in carefully. And this time we are going to press it with medium pressure. So we're going to want to put about 20 to 25 pounds of weight on. And for my press, that just means I turn my little turny things here at the end. I turn them until I think it's about 25 pounds of pressure. Okay, friends, it has been 8 hours. It is time for us to take our cheese out of the press. Oh, it's a beauty. There's our beautiful wheel of Gouda cheese. So my 4 gallons of milk is not yielding a lot of cheese right now, mostly because we're still calf sharing, so the cows are holding back the yummiest parts of their milk for their calves. They just do that instinctively. And so I expect once we wean the calves, I'll get a higher yield. So typically, with 4 gallons of milk, you would expect to have between 4 and 5 pounds of cheese. And I have just under 4 pounds. So I fully expect that once we wean the calves, we will be back up to a 5-pound wheel of cheese from 4 gallons of milk. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to brine our cheese in a 20% saltwater brine. And I'll put the directions in the description for you. But this is a 20% saltwater brine. And here's the other reason it's a good idea to make cheese, if it's a cheese making week, to make cheese, multiple wheels of cheese in 1 week, because you get to reuse your salt water. So I've had this salt water in the refrigerator since Saturday, and this is the 3rd wheel of cheese that I'm brining in it. So now this is gonna brine overnight for 12 hours. And then tomorrow morning, I will take it out of the brine, and then I will put it in the refrigerator to dry. So this is the first wheel that I made, and this one is all dry and ready to be vacuum sealed and put into the cheese cave where it'll age at 50 degrees. And then, so when they're dry, they should feel like a clammy handshake. This one I made a few days ago, and I'm still flipping this one, giving it a chance to dry on one side or the other side. And so that one I'm still turning in the refrigerator, and then this one will go in the refrigerator tomorrow. And then I'll vacuum seal them and put them in the cheese cave. I'll mark them with the date, and then these will be ready to eat after Christmas. So let's say 4, there's 12 pounds of Gouda cheese right here.